Hey everyone, and welcome back. This deep dive is all about finding those small changes that unlock huge results. And we're doing it with Atomic Habits by James Clear. We've got our expert here with us again, ready to help us break it all down. And it's not just about the big ideas. We're going deeper to uncover those subtle, but really actionable points that make you think, oh, why didn't I think of that before? So if you've already dipped your toes into the world of self-improvement, you get it, you know the basics, but you're ready to really dive deeper. You want those light bulb moments.
It's about taking those concepts we sort of already know, like, yeah, consistency is important, but then giving you the tools to actually apply it in a way that sticks.
Exactly. So to kick things off, Clear opens with this really interesting story about British cycling. Before 2003, they were basically nowhere on the world stage. Then they bring in this guy, Dave Brailsford, who completely transforms the team, using the strategy that he calls the aggregation of marginal gains. Now, I know that might sound kind of complicated at first.
It sounds like a mouthful.
It does.
But it's a really simple idea.
So break it down for us.
It's about finding these tiny areas for improvement, often in places you wouldn't even think about, and then making like a 1% improvement. But then you do that across everything.
So it's like looking for all those hidden 1% and just adding them up.
Exactly. Brailsford was convinced that if they could do this, those tiny gains would compound over time and give them a huge advantage.
And wow, did it work. The British cycling team went from basically zero to hero, dominating the Olympics. The Tour de France, I mean, they were even like testing different massage gels to see if they could shave off milliseconds in recovery time.
They were really obsessed with those details.
Talk about attention to detail.
That's it. And that's really the core message of the book, this idea that even tiny gains, when you apply them consistently, can create this massive change over time, like compound interest. Except it's for your habits.
That's what's so great about this book.
Yeah.
It takes this concept that we kind of already understand, like, yeah, consistency matters. But then it breaks it down into this system that you can actually use. Which brings us to another really big idea in the book. Clear argues that while goals are good for setting your direction, it's systems that actually get you there.
Oh, totally. It's so easy to get caught up in the excitement of a goal. Like, yeah, I'm going to do this, but then what? It's the day-to-day stuff that really matters. The systems we put in place are what determine our progress.
I think we've all been there. Like, I used to be all about setting these big goals, but then I'd be so focused on the outcome that I would totally forget about the daily actions. Like, what do I actually need to do today?
It's like you said you want to run a marathon, but then you never train.
Exactly.
You need a system for that.
So true.
It makes sense, though. Our brains are wired to crave that feeling of accomplishment, that feeling of like reaching the finish line. But the real magic, that happens in the in-between, in the consistency of our actions.
Okay, so how do we actually shift our focus from setting goals to building systems? What's the first step?
It all starts with a tiny but really powerful shift in mindset. We have to stop focusing on what we want to achieve and instead focus on who we want to become.
So less about I want to lose weight and more about I'm the kind of person who makes healthy choices.
You got it. It's about changing the belief that's driving the behavior. Let's say someone's trying to quit smoking. If they're saying, I'm trying to quit, they're still identifying as a smoker.
That makes sense.
Right. But if they say, I'm not a smoker, well, that's a completely different mindset.
It's like they're already there.
Exactly. You're changing the identity.
That's such a good point. Because if you're constantly thinking of yourself as someone who's struggling to quit, you're probably more likely to give into those cravings.
Totally. When your identity lines up with your behavior, the habits become way easier to maintain because they're not fighting with who you think you are.
I love that. So we had to start seeing ourselves as the type of people who already have the habits we want. Like if I want to write a book, I shouldn't be going around saying I want to be an author.
Yeah.
I should be saying I am a writer.
100%. And then the key is you have to act accordingly. So you show up every day and write, even if it's just for a few minutes, because that's what writers do.
That's so powerful. Okay, so we've talked about the importance of building systems. We've talked about shifting our identity. But how do habits actually work? Like, what's the science behind all of this?
So Clear breaks it down into what he calls the 4-step habit loop.
Okay.
Cue, craving, response, and reward.
So is this like a cycle that's just running in the background of our minds all the time?
Pretty much. So first you have the cue. This is the trigger.
Right.
It basically signals to your brain, hey, time to initiate that behavior. Think of it like seeing a notification pop up on your phone.
Okay, I get it.
Then you have the craving, which is that desire you feel to check the notification. Then the response, that's the actual picking up your phone and checking it. And finally, the reward, that feeling of satisfaction you get from satisfying the craving.
Even though it usually only lasts for a few seconds.
Exactly.
Wow, so this whole process is happening all the time, even when we're not aware of it.
All the time.
And the key to changing our habits is to become aware of this cycle, to actually understand the cues, the cravings, the responses, and the rewards
Yeah.
that are driving our behavior. Okay, so let's say there's a habit that I want to change. Where do I even begin?
It's like, you wouldn't try to fix a car engine without knowing how the engine works, right? You got to understand the different parts, how they all fit together.
Yeah, that makes sense.
It's the same with habits. Once you understand how the habit loop works, you can start to see where you can actually make changes.
So it's not just about willpower then. It's about understanding the system and working with it.
Exactly. And the good news is Clear actually gives us some really practical strategies for doing that. He calls them the 4 laws of behavior change. Make it obvious. Make it attractive. Make it easy. And make it satisfying.
Okay, I like that. They're very actionable.
Yep.
So let's start with make it obvious. How do we actually make our good habits more obvious?
One really powerful technique is something called habit stacking. And it's all about using your existing habits to build new ones. So for example, you could say, after I pour my morning coffee, I'll meditate for 5 minutes.
Oh, I've actually tried that one. Linking a new habit to something I already do, like that first cup of coffee, it's been huge for me. It's like my brain doesn't even have to think about it anymore.
Exactly. You're basically creating this mental shortcut. And the stronger that existing habit is, the more effective the stack is going to be. And it's not just about linking habits together. You can also use visual cues to make those desired habits more prominent.
Oh, so like putting my running shoes right by my bed, so I
Yeah.
literally trip over them first thing in the morning.
Exactly. Or if you're trying to drink more water,
Okay.
keep a full glass on your desk. It's about making those cues impossible to ignore.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So we're making the good habits obvious. But what about the other side of that? How do we make the bad habits less appealing?
So one of the best ways to break a bad habit is to actually reduce your exposure to the cues that cause it in the first place.
So like if you're constantly checking social media, delete the apps from your phone.
Exactly. Make it harder to do.
Love it.
And on the flip side, we can make those good habits more attractive.
That actually reminds me of something else that Clear talks about, temptation bundling. What is that?
So temptation bundling is this really clever way to make a habit that you need to do more enjoyable by pairing it with something that you want to do.
Oh, so like only letting myself listen to my favorite podcast while I'm on the treadmill?
Exactly. You're basically tricking your brain into associating something pleasurable with something that might otherwise feel like a chore.
Genius.
Yeah.
I am definitely trying that one. You know, it's funny because I used to think that motivation was the key to building good habits. But Clear actually says that relying on motivation alone is a recipe for disaster.
Motivation is unreliable. It comes and goes.
Yeah.
The real key is to design your environment in a way that supports your habits, no matter how you're feeling on any given day.
So it's more about creating a system that makes those good habits inevitable
Yes.
and the bad habits impossible.
Exactly.
I love that.
And a big part of that is making your good habits easy and your bad habits difficult.
It's like you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. But you can make it really, really thirsty.
Exactly. The idea is to make those good habits as easy as possible. So Clear gives this example. If you want to work out in the morning, lay out your workout clothes the night before. That way when you wake up and you're feeling groggy, everything's ready to go.
I like that.
You've removed the obstacles.
No excuses.
Exactly.
And speaking of removing obstacles, Clear talks about this thing called the 2-minute rule, which sounds almost too simple,
Yeah, it does.
but I'm guessing that's kind of the point.
It is. The 2-minute rule is all about making it so easy to get started that you almost can't say no. So the idea is you're going to take that new habit
Right.
and you're going to break it down into something that takes 2 minutes or less.
So instead of saying, I'm going to meditate for 20 minutes, you would say, I'm going to sit down and close my eyes for 2 minutes.
Exactly. Because we all know how hard it can be to just get started. But once you've overcome that initial inertia, you're much more likely to keep going.
It's like you're tricking yourself into building momentum.
100%.
Those small wins really do make a difference.
They do. And the same principle applies to breaking bad habits. You want to make them as difficult as possible, increase that friction if you're trying to cut back on social media. Log out of your accounts, delete the apps from your phone, Use a website blocker if you have to.
Make it inconvenient.
Exactly.
So it's like we're using our environment to kind of nudge ourselves in the right direction.
That's a great way to put it.
And we can't forget about the power of rewards.
So important.
Because at the end of the day, our brains crave that feeling of satisfaction.
Oh, absolutely. Clear's fourth law is all about making it satisfying. We're far more likely to repeat a behavior if it's followed by something positive, even if it's something small.
So like if you're trying to stick to a budget, maybe you allow yourself a small indulgence at the end of the month if you stay on track.
Exactly. Or if you're working on a big project, you could reward yourself with a break or a small celebration after you hit a milestone.
It's amazing how much of our behavior is driven by these unconscious reward systems.
It really is.
But the good news is, once we're aware of them, we can actually use them to our advantage.
That's what it's all about, understanding the rules of the game, so we can start winning.
It's been so interesting breaking down these 4 laws of behavior change. Make it obvious, make it attractive, make it easy, and make it satisfying. So before we wrap up, what are some of the other big takeaways from Atomic Habits that have really stuck with you?
You know, one that I always come back to is the importance of tracking your progress. It sounds simple, but it's a really powerful way to stay motivated.
Because what gets measured gets managed.
Exactly. Even just having something visual like a habit tracker or a calendar can make a huge difference.
I think it's because you're giving yourself credit for those small wins.
Yeah,
And that makes you want to keep going.
absolutely. It's like this positive feedback loop.
So important.
And Clear also talks about finding your tribe, the people who share your values and support your goal.
Because we're social creatures.
We are. And our environment plays such a huge role in shaping our habits. So surrounding yourself with people who are on the same path as you can make a world of difference.
It's like that saying, you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with.
I love that saying.
Yeah. Choose your company wisely.
Couldn't agree more.
We covered so much ground today, but I feel like we just scratched the surface of all the incredible insights in Atomic Habits. So for our listeners who are feeling inspired and ready to actually take action, what's one piece of advice that you would give them?
Start small. Pick one tiny habit that you want to build or change, and focus on doing it consistently for 30 days. Don't try and change everything at once, just take it one step at a time.
Because those small steps add up over time.
They really do.
It's like James Clear says, success is the product of daily habits, not once-in-a-lifetime transformations.
Oh, good.
And there you have it, folks, a deep dive into Atomic Habits. We explored the science of habit formation, we uncovered those 4 laws of behavior change, and hopefully we gave you the tools to actually build a life you love, one good habit at a time. Just remember, lasting change doesn't happen overnight. It's those tiny 1% improvements that you make consistently over time. So be patient with yourselves, celebrate the wins, and never ever underestimate the power of small changes. Until next time, happy habit building.
Thanks for tuning in to the audio podcast. You're here with my friend Jordan, and I'm Ashley. We hope today's episode brought some light to your day. Don't forget to follow us on your favorite platform so you never miss an episode. Share it with a friend and keep spreading the good vibes. Until next time, stay curious, stay kind,